Okay. Now, Now, in general, being a statistician, we will be overwhelmed to see the responses from the various disciplines that they apply the statistical methods for their data. Okay, so I recall the statement given by Professor C.R. Rao, who is a living legend in statistics, who is 102 years now. He says that the statistician or the practitioner of the data, whoever may be, they should live with the data. What does it stand for? Live with the data means spend time as much as possible in exploring the data so that their patterns can tell us more insights what it has. So directly we should not jump to the objective that are framed for the apply this technique for the questions which are on Likert scaling. First thing is, it will help us to identify the underlying factors. That means, let us take an example like this: social acceptability, psychological distress, self-esteem, anxiety, depression level. These are all the 5 constructs I have in my questionnaire. In each construct, I have listed, let us take 10 or 15 items. Now, if I want to talk about 15 items, it will be a cumbersome, and the data may get duplicated or it may be overestimated if at least 2 to 3 variables among the 15 items under social acceptability are correlated within themselves. So we need to identify such small clusters of variables which are homogeneous, which talk about a similar information about a particular factor. Next, what is another purpose? We need to screen the variable so that any variable collinearity is nothing but a high amount of correlation that exists between 2 or more variables. If such variables are noticed in the analysis, then it authenticates that there is an issue of multicollinearity. You might have heard this multicollinearity in the concept of regression, but that also applies here, and that is required in factor analysis, but that is the issue in fitting a regression model. 2 different topics, but the purpose differs from topic to topic. Now, we need to expect some sort of a collinearity when we handle several variables at hand under each construct or a dimension. The third one is summary of the hidden data variation. That means we need to choose a variable which is completely independent to the remaining set of variables so that the factors information may not be get duplicated. Now, the fourth one is sampling of variables. Okay, we need to create the factors which are non-dependent among themselves. Okay, I will take you an example at a later stage now. Now, clustering of objects, I have told this. Now, what actually factor extraction stands for? That means the number of factors should be, which are to be extracted or which will be extracted by means of principal component analysis and factor analysis. Those number of factors should be less than the number of variables. Let us take, I told no, in social acceptability or psychological distress, we might be having 15 items on a Likert scale. Now, when we identify the factors, let us take, we got 4 factors, which can be created, these 15 items can be repooled into these 4 factors. Okay? Now, each principal component, that particular factor is also called as a principal component. Okay? And now, for example, factor will have a technical value, that is what we call the eigenvalue. If the eigenvalue is around 3.69, then around 4 variables will be included in that particular factor. Some more analysis, interpretation, understanding about the factor, that suppose there are 9 variables, then each variable accounts for 100%, total is 100% divided by 9. Each variable accounts for 11% of expressing or explaining the variability in the data. Clear? Now, how to see that? That means each variable is converted, 9 variables are converted into 4 factors. And in one factor, there are 4 variables. When each variable contributes 11% of variation, converting that 3.69 of that particular factor into the 11% of variation, so that principal factor will account for 41% of the spread or the variability in the total data. This is how we have to interpret. Okay, now let us understand like this. There are 5 variables I have taken and there are 3 factors that are identified. So here the checkpoint is the number of factors are less than the number of variables. Now the values like 0.235, 0.125, minus 0.265, they are all called loadings. They are called factor loadings. Okay, so factor loadings, and this factor loadings lies between -1 and +1. Each variable may have similar loadings in multiple factors. Okay, multiple factors. Now what is the meaning of that? If a variable has a highest number in a particular factor, then that particular variable is highly correlated with respect to that particular factor. For example, if you see the loading between V2 and factor 2, it is factor 1, it is 0.8789. That means the factor loading represents the degree of is correlated to the factor. That means here variable 3, sorry, it's a typo error. Variable 3 is associated with respect to the elements of factor 1. So, in simple, a one-line understanding loading is that higher the loading implies stronger is the relationship between the variable and the factor associated with that. Okay, now we have another technique called factor rotation. I'll do one thing, I'll just move on. I'll take an example, then I'll come back. Now, this is one kind of a study by an employee in an industry talking about various items on a particular construct. The items are like this. The employee has an interesting capabilities, professional skills, trustworthiness, and he or she is experienced, attractiveness, helpful, reliable, skilled, entertaining, honest, fair, energetic, trained, and truthful. Now there are around 13 items. Yes, please. There are 13 items in this particular construct. Now, reread these items. Can we make some kind of a exercise in a very raw way, that if we see here, trustworthy, helpful, or we can say professional, experienced, skilled, and trained. This all talks about the personality with respect to the professional development. That means the employee is very much experienced or have an expertise with respect to the trained personnel. Okay? Now, how do we get this? See in the values which are in the 3 columns, factor 1, factor 2, factor 3. See interesting, where it has the maximum load. it has the maximum load in factor 3. This is the 0.699. Now professional, it has a maximum load on factor 2, 0.64982. Trustworthy, it has a maximum load in the first factor. Likewise, if you go on observing and identifying each item which will fall under what factor, now we get this kind of entities. Professional, as I told earlier, that professional, experienced, skilled, and trained. They all talk about the characteristics of an employee in an trained personnel. Now, moving forward, there are some other items like trustworthy, helpful, reliable, honest, fair, and truthful. It talks about the reliability or a kind of a person's behavior in terms of faithfulness. So that these items come together under the umbrella of faithfulness of that particular characteristic. Now the rest, interesting, attractive, entertaining, and energetic. They are all the physical appearances or kind of aesthetics that talk about one's behavior. In simple to say, it is what we call the charismatic features. Charismatic features. So now, going back to this is the main purpose. So how do we get that? How do we get this kind of a table? This is done using the factor rotation. There are various techniques that are available to do this factor rotation. A few to mention are the variance maximum rotation. In short, it is called varimax rotation. Okay, technically or a statistical way, this is much more important in identifying the similar variables which are highly related to each other to form a factor. After rotation, each variable will have high loading only on one particular factor. As I showed here. After rotation, each variable has a high loading only in one factor. Either this, that means it's just thing like mutually exclusive items. Professional comes under factor 2. Trustworthy has a high loading in factor 1. Helpfulness has a high loading in factor 1, not in the other factors. So this is what the meaning of this point stands for. Okay, this point. That is, after rotation, each variable will have very high loading only on one factor. And it will have a very low loading on the other factors. So the rotated factors like varimax, Oblimin rotations are very much easy to interpret, and it can be easily started out with respect to the size of the loading. What does the size of loading stands for? The high value in one factor and the remaining factors will have the low loading. So this is what we call the size of the loading. Yeah. Now, let's move next to that. Yeah, this is another technique that I will not be covering much, but still I want to show you the difference between the dimensionality reduction and observing the commonality, kind of a concordance, kind of a proximity of the items. Now if you see, this is a technique called market basket analysis. Here also, the similarities between the items or the variables in the total supermarket or a kind of a mall will be observed, and the concordance index, the degree of high agreement, will be studied between the variables. And how do we interpret this? This is very simple. Now if you see, people who buy whole milk, only the milk, whole milk, most probably they will buy yogurt and cereals. The people who buy whole milk or people who buy rice and sugar, there are chances, the degree of concordance between the purchasing behavior of the customers who buy rice and sugar, that is high chance that they will buy the whole milk. Similarly, if they buy domestic eggs and rice, there is a moderate, because the line shade is very light. Here the line shade is very dark. That means it shows the degree of concordance. Okay, the similarity or the purchasing behavior of customers when they buy vegetables and chocolates, there is a moderate probability that they will buy the milk as another entity. Similarly, if you see the above figure, if they buy herbs, fruits and vegetables and juice, then there are chances that they will buy other vegetables also. Okay, and if you see the other one, the small one, that if they buy liquor or a red or blush wine, there are high chances that they will be or they might purchase the bottled beer as well. So why we have to do this? So this kind of a market basket analysis will help keep the items which are sold together and they can be placed next to next. Okay, so that it will improve the sales, it will improve the revenue, it will create a proper demand of those items which fall into the same sale clusters. It means this is one topic. Okay, now this is quite interesting, that can be applied. Mostly it will be observed in logistics and supply chain management and there's entrepreneurships, all this other topics. Now let us move to the case study analysis that can be that I will show in SPSS. Okay, now I will take SPSS data. Before that, I will open a questionnaire with which I will connect to the SPSS data. Now, this is one questionnaire. This is one questionnaire which consists of set of the demographic variables, some sort of a variables on investments. Percentage of income do you want to save? And what is the purpose of your saving? And what is the frequency of your investment? And so on and so on. Now there are three constructs here. There are three constructs. One talks about the activities of investments. You can say, what do you want? What do you think about your lifestyle? Give your opinion with the help of statements given below on 5 points. Clear? So, first thing is about the activities. Like I try new and different things. TV is main form of entertainment. I am a spender than a saver. I would rather spend a quiet evening at home than go out of a party. It's a negative about if I say strongly agree, then it shows that I'm not a spender, or I don't invest, I don't, I don't my expenditure on outside activity is very minimum. I spend a lot in shopping. This is a direct question on a positive side. My vacation plans are perfect. Okay, so the questions under each construct may be of a reverse ordering or a direct ordering. Now the second construct has 13 items or 13 questions which talks about the interest. Like financial security is very important to me. I am certainly more conventional than experimental. My greatest achievements are ahead of me, which will talk about various items on the interest, on investment, the lifestyle, and the community-based activities. And then opinions on the lifestyle. I say positive things about to other people. I feel good when I buy something new. Okay? And I intend to purchase products in the future from the same mall. That talks about the perception. That talks about the impression that the customer has on a particular mall. I buy products I like, regardless of the current fashion. So these are all some items like this. Now, there might be some sort of interdependency between the items under each construct. Like, if you see, my greatest achievements are ahead of me. That means my social status is an important part of my life. Okay, and I think I have more self-confidence than most people. Okay, and if you see this, another one is I uh, I shop for status and style and not for price. It talks about the self-esteem. It talks about the self-esteem item. I mean self-esteem dimension. So now we will take this data and perform the factor analysis on any of the construct, so that we will try to identify what sort of a weight items under any construct are interdependent to each other. Now let's move to the SPSS part. The SPSS window is opening. It will take a while. Yes. Hope the screen is visible. Right. So now we have the items as what we have seen in the questionnaire. It talks about some demographic factors like age, gender, occupation, monthly income, percentage income that you save, okay, every month or every some top part of a time. Okay, now let's try to do the data reduction techniques. Now, how to do that? First, I will focus on the procedure of conducting the factor analysis, and then I'll take the output, interpret the output one by one. Now go to Analyze, Dimensionality Reduction, Factor Analysis. So this is the first step that we need to, and moreover, one point that to be taken care is, from here should be in a ordinal type. It works when it is not in ordinal type also, but it is better to keep purpose and reference point of view. Let us keep all these items as the ordinal style. So SPSS, this pop-up itself indicates that most of the data fall into the three categories. Either it is a measuring, or ordinal, or nominal. Just changing to have a proper understanding of each item under each construct. Yeah. Now let's save this file. Analyze, dimensionality reduction, factor. Now, what is the question item starts from financial security or opinions we can take. Financial security, 13 items are there. Let us see. It will start with financial security, ends with I prefer to buy well-known designer labels than this. So select the items under each construct, under that particular construct, send it to the variables. Now, first option is descriptive. Let us create the descriptives for all the items. And as I told earlier, that this technique purely depends upon the relational factor, that is the correlation analysis. We have to select that, and then significant values, whether the obtained correlation is adequate enough to talk about the collinearity between the pair of variables. Let us select that. It will give us a very 13 cross 13 matrix. Now, the another option that we have to select is KMO and Bartlett's test for sphericity. KMO stands for Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin test for sampling adequacy. That means the number of samples that we have in the study, collected for the study, is adequate enough to run and give a better results in a meaningful way. Now, another thing is sphericity assumption is nothing but the variance, amount of variability that is expressed by each item is uniform. That is the hypothesis that we get under Bartlett's test for sphericity. Most of the time it should be rejected because the variability across each item should be varied. Then only you will have a better percentage of variation among using the items, that is 13 items. Now continue button, then go to the extraction. By default, we go with the principal components. Apart from that, you have various techniques that I don't want to venture now, but most prominently and most widely used method of extracting the factors is the principal component extraction. And I need a scree plot. It's nothing but an elbow plot also. It is also called as an elbow plot, where the sudden dip and then it may go like a horizontal to the x-axis. Now go to the rotation. As I told, Varimax, Fertimax and Equimax, they are all called orthogonal rotations, and non-orthogonal rotations are direct oblimin and Promax. So we choose the Varimax rotation, continue, and go to the scores. Okay, now we can go with the display factor score coefficient. This will give us the coefficients associated with respect to each item under a factor. So these scores will help us to write a linear combination which will support us to define. Okay. Now under options, nothing to test much. I can suppress less than 0.5 if you want. Continue. So once we do this, we can directly go to the OK button. But before that, let me have a quick recall that what options we have selected. Under descriptives, we have selected univariate, we have selected coefficients, we have selected significant levels, and we have selected the KMO and Bartlett test for sphericity assumption. Under extraction button, we have chosen the scree plot as well as the principal component method of extraction. Now under rotation, we have chosen the Varimax rotation, and under scores, the factor score coefficient matrix. Now we can enable the variables as a regression method also. We'll see. Once all these things are done, we'll go on pressing OK. It will give us a big list of tables, starting with the descriptive analysis, rotated component matrix, communalities, many other. Now, the first table comes with the mean descriptive statistics. There are 110 responses in the study. If you see the first item, financial security is very important to me. So on an average, it is 4.55 out of 5. So it's a very high priority item for all the respondents, that they have chosen 4 or 5 as their response. So that is the highest average value. That is the item which has got the highest average value. Now, next to it is 4.3. That means my family is the single most important thing to me. That means they are giving importance. Now, if you see, family security is very important to me. And then my family is the single most important thing to me. And then next is, it's general, it's more important to understand my inner self than to be famous, powerful, or wealthy. So they are very secured and self-centric with respect to their family, with respect to their inner self, with respect to their financial security. As well as they have a proper target that my greatest achievements are ahead of me. Just by reading the items, okay, we can easily figure out that these four items may fall into one particular component. Okay, and least response is observed is I shop for status and style and not for price. So this has been disagreed by majority of the respondents. Okay, so now this is the correlation matrix. This is the correlation matrix. Now see, the first item, here it is, the first item, and the second item, which is also on the lines of important, has a moderate correlation, and the other item is about weak correlation. Okay, and like this, each and every item we have to see the amount of correlation that observes between each item. So if you see this, I can take out this value, 0.695. That is between, I think I have more self-confidence than most people, is highly correlated with, before trying a new product or service, I seldom seek the advice of others. These two are positively highly correlated. Similarly, I shop for status and style, not for practice, not for price. So likewise, there are some good amount of correlations that are noticed here. Now, coming to the KMO's measure of sampling adequacy, it's 0.471. It's not satisfactory actually, because in a textbook, in some of the articles, there is a rule that the number of samples to run a factor analysis is minimum to minimum 200 samples. Okay, now we have 110 samples, still the result has come, but it is reflected in the measure suggested by Kaiser, Mayer and Olkin that it is 0.471, which is not a satisfactory outcome. The sampling adequacy, there are not much of adequate samples to give a better result. So I have taken intentionally to show that this kind of a results also do come in analysis part. Nothing to worry about this. Nothing to worry about this, because this is an illustration to show that how it should not be. Okay. Now, when it comes to the communalities, this communality is nothing but the percentage of variance or the variability explained, or a contribution of each variable to explain the spread of the data is like this. Now, 0.892, 0.916, it lies between 0 and 1. The community lies between 0 and 1. And higher the extraction value, higher the communality value, that variable has the highest importance. That variable has a highest importance. Now, coming to this total variance explained table, actually we have seen that there are 13 items. Now, each item has a value. This is nothing but your lambda value. So, if we say that the first factor is lambda value is 3.154, which means that this might have 3 items in a component. The first component may contain 3 components into that. The second component may contain 2, the third may contain 2, the fourth may contain 1, and fifth may contain 1 or 2. Generally, the thumb rule says that the lambda value or the eigenvalue, if it is less than 1, then it will stop the identification of number of factors. Now, each factor helps in explaining the amount of variation. It will be in a monotonically decreasing order. The first component will contain more number of items or more number of variables so that it can explain high volume of percentage of variation. In total, 5 components together, it can explain 68.357 percentage of variation. That means all the 13 items will be condensed into 5 components, leading to around 68% of information about the responses. Okay, now come back to the scree plot. If I create a demarcation line, add a reference line to that, click on that position, you make it as 1 because I set eigenvalue as 1. Now if you see how many factors are below, how many component numbers are above 1. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this scree plot will help us to identify the number of components from the total number of variables. Okay, so it shows that it tells an information that 13 variables can be repooled into 5 meaningful components. Instead of talking about 13 variables, now we have reduced the dimension of the data from 13 to only 5 new variables. So if I talk about 5 new variables, the complete information about all the 13 items are covered without loss of any data, without loss of any variable, without loss of any information. So that is the advantage of condensing. That is the advantage of reducing the dimensionality to control the redundancy or duplication of information by a set of interdependent items. Now, the same thing, if you see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see after 5, the percentage of variance and cumulative are not displayed because the eigenvalues for the remaining items are less than 1, so they are ignored, and the first 5 components will accommodate all the 13 items. Now, this is the component matrix. I have already told that we will get 2 component matrices. One is a component matrix, the other one is a rotated component matrix. Now, what is the difference between these 2 matrices? The first one, which is in front of your screen, which is on your screen, tells that it may have an equal amount of loading in 2 or more factors, 2 or more components. Now, if you see, high loading is observed for the first item. High loading is observed on first factor as well as the fifth component. Now, there are some blanks here and there. Nothing to worry about that. While doing analysis, we have given an option to suppress the values which are whose eigenvalue is less than 0.1 to suppress. Okay, so that's why these values are less than 0.1, so they are not displayed here. Okay, coming to the second item, it has a highest loadings on component 1 as well as component 3. So likewise, each item may have a similar kind of a loading. Like see, my social status is an important part of my life. It has almost equal share of loading in component 1 and 2. But as I did earlier using the slide of factor rotation, then we need to make use of kindly mute your mics. Okay, it talks about the weightage that is associated with respect to each item under each component. Now, we need to make use of the factor rotation, that is Varimax rotation. Using that particular rotation, we'll come to know that which particular item is heavily loaded on what type of a component. On what type of a component. See the difference now. For the first item, there was a heavy loading on, the first item was loaded on a large way in component 1 as well as component 5. After using the axis rotation techniques, now it has a maximum loading on first, then the remaining things are having low loadings. If you remember or recall, the points that we discussed in the beginning of the talk is that have a major loading or a large value in only one component, and remaining components will have a low loadings. Now you can see the same here. The first item is having a large loading on component 1, and the remaining components have a low loadings. Now see the second item. Second item here, it was heavily loaded on component 3 and component 1, but upon Varimax rotation, the heavy loading is observed in component 5. Third item is loaded in component 3. Likewise, irrespective of the sign, we need to identify each item's its maximum loading under which component. Now let's do that exercise by editing this table. Let me remove these values so that we can easily note that each item is under which component. Now just I am doing in trivial way. Right, done. So now what we have to do is, now the remaining things are done, go back to this table. What we did, how did we interpret this value? The first component, the lambda value is 3.15, which is close to 3, let us take. That means it contains 3 items. Now come to the rotated component matrix. How many items that fall under component 1? One, this is financial security. The other one is I have more self-confidence, and the other one, the third one is before trying a new product or service, I seldom seek the advice of others. Similarly, the other item component, it is 1.986, close to 2. Because of the high correlation, because of the high amount of correlation, there are 4 items under component 2. Like, it is very important to me to feel I am a part of a group. Overall, I would say I am very happy. My social status is an important part of my life, and I prefer to buy well-known designer labels rather than taking a chance of something new. So the choice and happiness that comes under this component. And the third component has 3 items related to my greatness, my greatest achievement, and certainly more conventional than experimental, because a confined, non-experimental mindset will lead to a part of a greatest achievements. I prefer making purchase from local offices, malls and stores without experimenting. They will go for a known local vendors, the malls, where they can go with a conventional way of purchase or investments than an experimental one. And the last component has, the last component has 2 items. In general, it's more important to understand my inner self as well as my family is single and most important to me. So these 2 related to a domestic and a personality entity. Okay, so this is how the 13 items are regrouped into 5 meaningful components. Now, this rotated component matrix has helped. This rotated component matrix has helped us to identify each item to which component they belong to. Is that over? No, because we need to focus on the component transformation matrix or a component score matrix. Component score matrix. Similarly, how we have done here, it has to be done here. The component score, if you see, this is the regression weight. It is the regression weight. Now we have to take this table. Now under first component, what are the items fallen? One is the financial security, the other one is the self-confidence, the third one is the seldom seek advice. So take those things. A new variable, let us define it as a V1, is equal to 0.417 into financial security. Then comes self-confidence plus 0.299 into the self-confidence plus what is the third one? Third one is seldom seek the advice, right here. Plus 0.428 into before trying a new product or a service, I seldom seek the advice of others. Now these three values, 0.417, 0.299 and 0.428, they are all called regression weights, and it will form a linear combination. It will form a linear combination. Likewise, component 2, what are there? Component 2, we have these four attributes, items. To take those values like 0.236 minus 0.236, that means this is negatively reflecting the outcome. 0.236 into the conventional, 0.382 into the very important to feel that they are in a group. At the same time, these two, and then you take my social status is important to point in part of my life, and then the last one is the I prefer to buy. So this 0.366 minus 0.021 2.294 and 0.205. Among these four coefficients or regression weights, this weight, 0.236, 0.382, 0.366, and 2.294 and 0.205. When we reorder them with respect to the descending value, like 0.382, 0.366, 0.294, 0.205, the least contribution or least weight is observed with respect to the last weight. And this will form another regression model, a kind of a linear combination that talks about the happiness about the respondent. And now coming to the third component, there are three variables about the achievements, convention, and purchase from the thing. Achievements is 0.469. If you see, that is the largest value in this particular column. Okay, 0.469, 0.369, and 0.403. So across each row also, these items will have a larger weight associated with that particular item. So 0.469 into the achievement, 0.369 into the conventional, plus 0.403 into purchase from the local will form another equation. Fourth one has only one, the fifth one has two. Okay, I understand my inner self as well as the family has a higher weightage to himself or herself. So these two will form. The five equations will talk about five different characteristics about the investment dimension. Okay, so this is how we talk about the make use of the component score coefficient matrix. Okay, so now actually to say these rotated components which are identified should be named in a proper way. Now, how do we name that? We have to read every item that are being identified and then give a proper name out of it. That proper name stands for a new variable. uh, what I do is I'll take this table to an Excel. I take this table to an Excel and do some exercise there so that we can repool the items and bring out a new linear combination. If we take this variable and write PC1, PC2, PC3, PC4, that is principal component 4 and principal component 5. Now, create a filter. Yeah. Okay, fine. Now, take these three items, put it in first component, and then select all, then go to this, select the 4 items, paste it under second component. Now coming to the third one, three items are there. Make it here, and then the fourth one is this, and the fifth one is this. Along with that, you have this. Okay, now so if you see these each items, I think, yeah, PC1, fine. Now, if you see this, one is the financial security, the other one is about the self-confidence about than most people, and then trying a new product, I seldom seek the advice of thing. So they all related to what fact? And second thing is, it's important to me to feel I'm a part of a group. I'd say I'm very happy. My social status is important. And then I prefer to buy well-known design labels than something else. So it talks about the happiness and the social status. Okay. So importance on importance that takes on importance and priority. Importance and priority. Okay, social importance, better to make that. Social importance and the priority as a name for that variable. And my greatest achievements are ahead of me. I'm certainly more conventional, and I prefer making a purchase from a local. Okay, so confined kind of a thing. I think we can name this as self-centric or self-focused. Okay, self-focused personality. And then I shop for status and style, not for price. It's kind of, can I take this name as self-esteem? And then this is about, in general, it's more important to understand my inner self than to be famous, powerful. And my family is uh, single most important than me. That talks about what we say, the domestic priorities, the domestic behavior, or self uh, domestic behavior, we can make it. But I'm just trying to give some names that may differ from person to person's perception. Okay, now what about this? Self financial security is very important to me. I think I have more self confidence. Before trying a new product, I seldom seek. It's kind of a self dependent, self dependent. So, so these are all five new variables. These are all noticed out of the 13 items. Now, I go back to the outcome. Now, let us take the factor score coefficients here. How do I write this is, copy this here and paste it in a new tool. Let me take the coefficients of this. Copy and paste it here. So, self-dependent. How do I write the matrix? Equation is self-dependent is equal to 0.417 into, let us take the financial security, plus 0.299 into self-confidence, plus 0.428 into seldom seek the advice. So this is like this. We can write for social importance, self-focused, self-esteem, domestic behavior, using the regression weights or scores associated to each factor. So like this, we get 5 equations and we get 5 variables. So the score will help us to talk about one's self-dependency or social importance or self-focused nature and self-esteemed one or domestic priorities. So this is the total view that the need of reducing the dimensionality. Now, what did the dimensionality stands for? The dimensionality stands for the number of variables that are observed under each dimension. And data reduction is nothing but, since these 3 variables are highly correlated and they are together and they have some sort of interdependency, all these 3 fall into one particular category. So likewise, you have we have identified certain items which are interdependent and they fall under each principal component. So in total, the factor analysis, which is an important multivariate tool, makes use of another multivariate tool, that is principal component analysis, to condense the number of variables into a smaller subsets. And another important point that to be noted down is that we have 2 types of a factor analysis. One is a confirmatory, one is exploratory factor analysis. The other one is a confirmatory factor analysis. Where they differ? Exploratory factor analysis is what we have done. That means we try to explore the similar entities and then repool them into a meaningful item or a meaningful new variable which purely depends upon the internal items. Like now self-dependent purely depends upon these three. Social importance and priority talks about these four items, and self-focused will talk about these three items. That means we try to manage and we try to see the possibility or explore that what sort of items fall under, how many components does it exist in the data, and what items fall under which particular component. So this kind of exercise, that is what we call exploratory data analysis. Now, where come this confirmatory do come? Confirmatory will talk about the model fit. So this is now 5 regression variables, 5 regression equations. Altogether can be structured into a path diagram, and then you can talk about the weights associated with respect to each construct, each new variable or a construct. These 5 variables are non-dependent. They are independent to each other because similar variables are in their respective umbrella, and these variables are independent to these variables. So these 5 new variables are independent to each other. So the thing is, we should be starting with the factor analysis, and the first step in factor analysis is the confirmatory factor analysis, explanatory factor analysis, and then to see the model behavior and model fitness, we have to go with the confirmatory factor analysis. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll take some time to have a discussion, then we can wind up the session. I'm about to stop my sharing the screen. Stop sharing the screen. Now we can have some sort of a query session for about 5 to 10 minutes. Thereafter, I think we can wind up the session. Now the floor is open for the discussion part. You place the questions in the chat box also. You can place the question in the chat box. Yeah, there is a question that for a PG student having 30 samples or less, is there any need to do? See, there are, this question has many points to cover. One thing is, if you have the questionnaire in the form which I showed, then if you have the questionnaire in the form which I showed, then 30 samples are not adequate. You need to have at least 200 samples. Okay, so 30 samples are different, 30 variables are different. 30 samples is nothing but the number of individuals or the number of records that you have in the data set. 30 variables is nothing but the column wise, like height, weight, body mass index, waist hip ratio, percentage of income. These are all called variables. And if you record these variables on individuals, that will become a sample, a record for each individual. So 30 samples is a row-wise record, a profile of each respondent. Variables talks about the characteristics of each respondent or an individual. So 30 samples are not adequate to conduct a factor analysis. Minimum to minimum, you should have a 200 records. Okay, any other question? So then if there are no questions, then it's over to the organizers. Before handing over this to organizers, let me thank the organizers, particularly Professor Muniswamy, for giving this opportunity to share the thoughts and the ideas behind the multivariate technique factor analysis. And thank you one and all for patience listening. Over to the organizers. Thank you.
For your valuable information. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable information.
Is anyone speaking? It's not clearly audible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable information.
Will I leave the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, madam.